The rattlesnake's warning came too late, as Gideon Oakes squinted through the dust clouds swallowing his cattle. The blistering summer of 1875 had turned the Texas plains into an unforgiving furnace, and now his herd of 200 longhorns was scattered across the parched landscape, disoriented and desperate for water. Sweat trickled down his sun-bronzed face as he spurred his chestnut mare forward, determined to salvage what was left of his livelihood. "Damn this heat to hell," he muttered, adjusting his worn leather hat to shield his eyes from the merciless sun. At 32, Gideon had seen his share of harsh seasons, but this drought threatened everything he'd built since returning from the war. The distant thunder of hooves pulled his attention to the eastern ridge, where his second-in-command, Lyle Brennan, appeared through the haze, waving frantically. "Gid, we've got strays heading for the canyons," Lyle's voice carried on the hot wind. "Davidson and Porter are trying to cut them off, but there's at least 40 head making a break for it." Gideon nodded grimly. "Round up who you can spare. I'll head them off at Blackwater Creek." Though the name was now a cruel joke, the creek had been nothing but cracked mud for weeks. As he rode hard across the plains, dust coating his throat and every inch of exposed skin, Gideon caught sight of something unexpected: a covered wagon tilted precariously on the dried creek bed, one wheel splintered beyond repair. Beside it, a woman in a dusty blue dress was attempting to coax a frightened mule to its feet. Curiosity and duty warred within him. The strays needed tending, but a lone woman out here meant trouble. With a muttered curse, Gideon changed direction. "Madam," he called out as he approached, slowing his mare to avoid spooking the mule further. "You're a fair stretch from anywhere safe." The woman turned, revealing a face streaked with dirt and dried tears, yet striking even in distress. Her honey-brown hair had come loose from its pins, and determination flashed in her hazel eyes despite her obvious exhaustion. "I'm aware of my predicament, sir," she replied with unexpected dignity, "though I'd welcome assistance if you're offering rather than stating the obvious." A smile tugged at Gideon's lips despite himself. "Gideon Oakes," he introduced himself, dismounting with a fluid motion born from years in the saddle. "Seems like you've had a rough go of it." "Temperance Odell," she responded, attempting to smooth her wrinkled dress. "My husband." Her voice faltered momentarily. "My late husband and I were traveling to his brother's ranch near Fort Worth when he took ill. Typhoid. I buried him 3 days ago." Gideon removed his hat out of respect. "My condolences, Mrs. Odell." She nodded stiffly. "The mule went lame this morning and then the wheel gave out. I've been trying to salvage what I can, but—" She gestured helplessly at the broken wagon and the items scattered around it. Behind them, a small voice called out, "Mama, I'm thirsty." Gideon turned to see a young girl no more than 6 peering from beneath the wagon's canvas cover. Her face was flushed with heat, lips dry and cracked. "Hope, stay in the shade," Temperance instructed, worry evident in her tone. "I'll find water soon." Understanding dawned on Gideon as he looked between mother and daughter. Without hesitation, he unhooked the canteen from his saddle and approached the wagon. "Here," he offered, holding it out to Temperance. "It's not much, but it's clean." Gratitude softened her features as she accepted it. "Hope, come here, darling. Slowly now." The little girl emerged, her golden hair matted with sweat and dirt. Temperance helped her take small sips from the canteen before drinking sparingly herself. She tried to return it, but Gideon shook his head. "Keep it. I've got another with my gear." It was a lie, but one he didn't regret. "Now, we need to get you both somewhere safe. My ranch is about 4 miles west. We can load what's essential on my horse and come back for the rest later." Temperance hesitated. I couldn't impose. A distant bellow interrupted her as several longhorns appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust as they charged toward the creek bed. No time to argue, Gideon said firmly, already moving to gather the girl. Those strays are spooked, and they'll run right through here. Working quickly, they secured the most valuable items to his horse. Gideon mounted first, then helped Hope up in front of him. He extended his hand to Temperance, who, after a moment's hesitation, grasped it firmly and swung up behind him. "Hold tight," he instructed as he nudged his mare into motion, feeling Temperance's arms encircle his waist. The sensation was unfamiliar after years of solitude, but not unwelcome. They rode hard, staying ahead of the panicked cattle. Hope clung to the saddle horn while Temperance pressed against Gideon's back, her warmth a stark contrast to the arid landscape around them. As they crested a rise, Gideon's ranch came into view, a modest two-story house with several outbuildings, a corral, and a windmill spinning lazily above a water tank. It wasn't much, but it was home. "There it is," he said over his shoulder. "Oakes Ranch. Not the fanciest spread, but it's sturdy and there's clean water." They rode into the yard as the sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. An older woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Gideon Oakes, I was beginning to worry," she called, then stopped short at the sight of his companions. "Well now, what have we here? Mrs. Abernathy, this is Mrs. Temperance Odell and her daughter Hope," Gideon explained as he dismounted. "Their wagon broke down by Blackwater Creek. They'll be staying with us until we figure something out." The housekeeper assessed the newcomers with kind but shrewd eyes. "Of course they will. Those poor dears look half dead from the heat." She approached and took Hope's hand. "Come along, child. Let's get you cleaned up and find something cool to drink." As Mrs. Abernathy led Hope inside, Gideon helped Temperance down from the horse. She swayed slightly on her feet, and he steadied her with a hand at her elbow. "Thank you," she murmured, suddenly looking every bit as exhausted as she must have felt. "I don't know what would have become of us if you hadn't come along." "No need for thanks," he replied, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Any decent man would have done the same." A sad smile touched her lips. "I've learned that decent men are rarer than you might think, Mr. Oakes." Before he could respond, Lyle rode into the yard, followed by two other cowboys herding the last of the strays. "Got 'em all, boss," Lyle called, then noticed Temperance with undisguised curiosity. "Good work," Gideon responded. "Get them settled in the south pasture. There's still some grazing there." He turned to Temperance. "I need to see to the cattle. Mrs. Abernathy will take good care of you and your daughter." She nodded, understanding. "Of course. Your livelihood comes first." As Gideon rode out with his men, he found himself looking back at the house, wondering about the woman whose dignity remained intact despite her circumstances. It had been a long time since anyone had stirred his curiosity this way. The next few days established a tentative routine. Gideon and his men worked from dawn to dusk, moving the herd between the few remaining patches of grazing land and hauling water to supplement the dwindling supply in the tanks. Temperance, refusing to be idle, helped Mrs. Abernathy with cooking and household tasks, while Hope, recovered from her ordeal, explored the ranch under the watchful eyes of both women. On the fourth evening, Gideon returned to find Temperance on the porch, mending one of his shirts. The setting sun cast a golden glow on her features, softening them. She had regained some color in her cheeks, and her hair was neatly braided down her back. "You don't need to do that," he said, removing his hat as he approached. She looked up, a small smile playing at her lips. "I'm earning my keep, Mr. Oakes. Besides, it gives me something to focus on besides my troubles." He sat beside her on the porch step, exhaustion seeping through his bones. "I sent Lyle to town today. He's arranged for a wagon to take you and Hope to Fort Worth whenever you're ready." "Oh." Something like disappointment flashed across her face before she masked it. "That's very kind. I should be ready to travel in a day or two." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the creak of the windmill and the distant lowing of cattle. "Your brother-in-law," Gideon finally said. "Will he welcome you?" Temperance's hand stilled on her mending. "I've never met him. Thomas, my husband, hadn't spoken to his brother in years. There was some dispute over their father's land." She sighed. "But he's our only family now, and Thomas believed he would help us if needed." "And if he won't?" Her chin lifted slightly. "Then I'll find work in Fort Worth. I'm a trained schoolteacher. I can provide for Hope." Gideon admired her resolve even as concern gnawed at him. A young widow alone in a frontier town faced considerable challenges. "You're welcome to stay here longer," he offered impulsively. "At least until you've had word from your brother-in-law." Her eyes met his, searching. "That's generous, but I wouldn't want to be a burden." "You're not," he assured her, surprised by how much he meant it. "Hope brings life to this place, and you—" He hesitated. "You're good company." A blush colored her cheeks. "Thank you. I'll consider it." Later that night, as Gideon lay in bed listening to the wind whistle through the eaves, he wondered what had possessed him to make such an offer. Having a woman and child at the ranch complicated things, especially with the drought threatening his livelihood. Yet he couldn't bring himself to regret it. The next morning brought an unexpected reprieve. Clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and heavy with promise. The cattle sensed it first, growing restless in the pasture. "Might get that rain after all," Lyle observed as they reinforced a section of fence. Gideon nodded, watching the clouds advance. "If it's a real soaker, we'll need to move the herd to higher ground. Last thing we need is a flash flood carrying off half our stock." By midday, the sky had darkened considerably, and the first rumble of thunder rolled across the plains. Gideon ordered his men to secure anything that might blow away and sent 2 riders to begin moving the cattle. He found Temperance in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Abernathy prepare containers to catch rainwater. "Storm's coming fast," he warned them. "Might turn nasty." Mrs. Abernathy nodded sagely. "Always does after a drought, nature balancing herself." Temperance looked concerned. "Will your men be safe out there?" "They know what they're doing," Gideon assured her, touched by her worry. "But I'll be joining them. The herd's easily spooked in this weather." The first fat raindrops began to fall as Gideon mounted his horse. By the time he reached the pasture, the storm had unleashed its full fury, sheets of rain driven by howling wind, lightning slashing across the sky, followed by deafening thunder. The cattle were panicking, despite his men's best efforts to keep them contained. Through the downpour, Gideon could see a section of fence had given way, and longhorns were pouring through the gap, heading toward a gully that would soon become a death trap when the flash floods came. For hours, Gideon and his men battled the elements and the terrified animals, driving them to safety as water began to course through previously dry creek beds. Soaked to the skin and mud splattered, they managed to save most of the herd, but lost 12 head to the rapidly rising waters. It was well after midnight when Gideon finally returned to the ranch house, exhausted beyond measure. To his surprise, a lamp still burned in the kitchen, and Temperance sat at the table, a pot of coffee keeping warm on the stove. "You're still up," he said unnecessarily, dripping water onto the floor. She rose immediately, bringing him a towel. "I was worried. It's treacherous out there." Their fingers brushed as she handed him the towel, and something electric passed between them. Gideon cleared his throat, focusing on drying his face. "Lost some cattle, but most are safe now. The rain's good news, even with the trouble it brings. He accepted the coffee she offered. You should be sleeping. I couldn't, she admitted, not knowing you were out in that. Her concern seemed to embarrass her, and she busied herself with tidying the already immaculate counter. Gideon watched her, warmed by more than just the coffee. Thank you for waiting up. Their eyes met, and for a moment the storm outside seemed less significant than the one brewing between them. But Temperance broke the connection first, stepping back. You need rest, she said softly. Good night, Mr. Oakes. Gideon, he corrected. After all this, I think you can call me Gideon. A small smile touched her lips. Good night, Gideon. The storm raged for 2 more days, transforming the parched landscape. Creeks overflowed their banks, pastures turned to mud, but the earth drank thirstily. When the clouds finally cleared, revealing a brilliant blue sky, the ranch seemed renewed. The following week brought another change. A letter arrived from Fort Worth. Temperance's brother-in-law had sold his ranch months ago and moved to California. The news left her visibly shaken. I don't know what to do now, she confessed to Gideon as they sat on the porch that evening. Hope was already asleep inside. I have some money saved, enough to get us to Fort Worth, but beyond that. Gideon had been pondering this very problem. The town's growing. They might need a school teacher. Perhaps, she agreed, though uncertainty shadowed her eyes. Hope deserves stability, not a mother scrambling for work in a strange town. The words were out before Gideon could reconsider them. Stay here, then. She looked at him in surprise. What? Stay here, he repeated, more confidently this time. The nearest school is 20 miles away. Children around here get little education. You could start a small school on the ranch. There are 5 families within riding distance who'd likely send their children. Temperance stared at him, hope and caution warring in her expression. You're serious, completely. He hadn't realized how serious until he'd spoken the words aloud. There's the old bunkhouse. We could convert it into a schoolroom. You and Hope could continue staying in the house. Why would you do this for us? She asked softly. Gideon hesitated, then chose honesty. Because in the short time you've been here, this place has felt more like a home than it has in years. Because Hope's laughter is the best sound I've heard in a long time. He took a deep breath. And because the thought of you leaving sits like a stone in my chest. Temperance's eyes glistened in the fading light. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it, he urged. That's all I'm asking for now. She reached out tentatively, placing her hand over his. I'll consider it. Over the next few weeks, as summer began to give way to early autumn, the idea of the school took shape. Gideon's men, when not tending the now thriving herd, helped clear and renovate the old bunkhouse. Temperance wrote letters to neighboring families, who responded with enthusiastic support. What also grew was the undeniable connection between Gideon and Temperance. It emerged in small moments, their hands touching as they passed tools, shared smiles over Hope's antics, conversations that stretched late into the evening after the child was asleep. Gideon found himself revealing things he rarely spoke of: his experiences during the war, the death of his parents that had left him the ranch at 25, his dreams for the future. Temperance, in turn, shared her own story: her childhood in Missouri, her brief marriage to a man who had been kind but often distant, her fears and hopes for Hope. One evening, as they walked the perimeter of the newly fenced garden that Temperance had started, she asked him a question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. Why have you never married, Gideon? He considered the question carefully. Never found the right woman, I suppose. Or maybe I wasn't looking. He glanced at her. The war changed me, made me wary of attachments. And now, her voice was barely above a whisper. Gideon stopped walking, turning to face her. The setting sun painted her features in gold and amber, and he thought she had never looked more beautiful. "Now I'm finding that some attachments might be worth the risk," he admitted. Something shifted in her eyes, fear, hope, longing all mingled together. "It's been less than 2 months since my husband died." "I know," he acknowledged, "and I respect your grief." "I'm not asking for anything, Temperance. I'm just telling you where I stand." She nodded slowly. "Thank you for your honesty." They resumed their walk, a new awareness humming between them. The school opened in early October with 12 students ranging from 6 to 14 years old. Hope was the youngest, proudly helping her mother arrange books and slates. Watching Temperance in her element, confidently leading the children through their lessons, Gideon felt a swell of admiration that went beyond mere attraction. That evening, after the last student had ridden home and Hope was helping Mrs. Abernathy with dinner, Gideon found Temperance standing by the corral, watching the sunset. "You're a natural teacher," he commented, coming to stand beside her. "Those children are lucky to have you." She smiled, pleased by the compliment. "It feels good to be useful again, to have purpose." "You've always had purpose," he countered. "Hope needs you." "Yes, but this is different. This is something just for me." She turned to face him. "Thank you for making it possible." "You did the hard part," he insisted. "I just provided the space." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant call of a whippoorwill. "I've been thinking about what you said," Temperance finally spoke. "About attachments being worth the risk." Gideon's heart quickened, and she took a deep breath. "My marriage to Thomas was comfortable. He was kind and he provided well for us, but there was always something missing." Her eyes met his, vulnerable yet determined. "I don't want to live half a life again, Gideon. I want more than comfort. I want passion and partnership." He stepped closer, drawn by her words. "Is that what you think we could have?" "I think it's what we're already building," she answered softly. "But I need time, for Hope's sake as much as my own." "Time is something I can give," he assured her, tentatively reaching out to take her hand. "We're in no rush." The brush of his calloused fingers against hers seemed to ignite something in Temperance. With unexpected boldness, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a brief, sweet kiss that ended almost before it began. "I didn't plan to do that," she confessed, looking slightly scandalized by her own actions. Gideon couldn't help but smile. "I'm glad you did." The next few weeks brought a gradual shift in their relationship. Small touches became more frequent, stolen moments more precious. They were careful around Hope, maintaining appropriate boundaries, but the child seemed to sense the change, watching them with curious eyes. One Sunday afternoon, as Hope napped after the midday meal, Gideon invited Temperance to ride out to a special place on the ranch, a small mesa overlooking the valley, where wildflowers had sprung up following the rains. "It's beautiful," she breathed as they dismounted. The landscape stretched before them, transformed from the barren wasteland it had been when they first met. "My father proposed to my mother here," Gideon told her, spreading a blanket on the ground. "He always said this spot had magic in it." Temperance settled beside him, understanding the significance of his words. "Tell me about them." He described his parents' love story, how his father, a former Union soldier, had come to Texas seeking a fresh start and found not only land but love with a local rancher's daughter. How they had built the ranch together through hard work and determination. How their deaths from influenza 2 years apart had nearly broken him. "They sound wonderful," Temperance said when he finished. "I wish I could have known them." "They would have loved you," he replied honestly. "And Hope too," she smiled at that. "Hope adores you. She's never had a consistent male figure in her life. Thomas was often away on business." Gideon considered his next words carefully. "I care deeply for her, for both of you." Temperance's hand found his on the blanket. I know. And we care for you too, she hesitated. Gideon, I need to ask you something important. Anything? If this continues between us, she began, would you want more children? Of your own blood, I mean. The question surprised him, but his answer came without hesitation. I've always wanted a family, but Hope is already family to me. Blood doesn't matter. Relief softened her features. Thank you for saying that. I wasn't sure if I could. After Hope's difficult birth, the doctor said another pregnancy would be risky. Gideon squeezed her hand. Then Hope is all we need. The word "we" hung between them, full of promise. Temperance shifted closer, and when their lips met this time, there was no hesitation, only a growing certainty. As autumn deepened toward winter, the ranch settled into a new rhythm. The school thrived under Temperance's guidance, and Gideon found himself increasingly involved with the children's education, sharing his knowledge of ranching and the natural world. Hope blossomed, secure in the affection that surrounded her. On a crisp December evening, with Christmas approaching, Gideon asked Temperance to take a walk with him after dinner. Snow was rare in this part of Texas, but a dusting had fallen that morning, transforming the landscape. I have something for you, he said when they reached the garden, now dormant for winter. From his pocket, he withdrew a small wooden box. It was my mother's. Temperance opened it with trembling fingers to reveal a simple gold band set with a single pearl. I know it's soon, Gideon said, his voice unexpectedly nervous. By some standards anyway, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Tears glistened in Temperance's eyes as she looked from the ring to his face. I love you, Temperance, he continued. I love the family we're becoming. I want to make it official if you'll have me. Have you asked Hope? She asked softly. Gideon smiled. I did. This afternoon while you were teaching. She said yes, provided she can call me Papa. A laugh bubbled from Temperance's throat, mingling with her tears. She's a shrewd negotiator. She took a deep breath. Yes, Gideon, yes, I'll marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Gideon marveled at how much his life had changed since that scorching summer day when dust and heat had scattered his herd and led him to a broken-down wagon by a dry creek bed. How sharing his canteen with a desperate woman and her daughter had somehow quenched a thirst in his own soul that he hadn't even recognized. They were married on Christmas Day, 1875, in the ranch house decorated with pine boughs and candles. The ceremony was small but joyful, with Lyle serving as best man and Hope proudly bearing the rings. Mrs. Abernathy wept openly, declaring it the happiest day the ranch had seen in years. That night, after Hope had finally succumbed to sleep, exhausted from excitement, Gideon and Temperance stood together on the porch, gazing at the star-filled sky. Are you happy? He asked, his arms encircling her from behind. Temperance leaned back against him, secure in his embrace. Completely. Are you? More than I ever thought possible. He pressed a kiss to her temple. When I found you in Hope, I thought I was the one offering salvation. I didn't realize you would save me too. She turned in his arms to face him. We saved each other. And now we build our future together. As their lips met beneath the winter stars, Gideon thought of the long journey that had brought them to this moment, how drought and desperation had forged something precious and enduring. Like the land around them, they had weathered the harsh season and emerged stronger, ready to flourish in the seasons to come. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The school expanded, eventually moving to a proper building in town as Temperance's reputation as an educator grew. Gideon's ranch prospered, allowing him to purchase additional land and improve their breeding stock. Hope grew into a confident young woman with her mother's intelligence, and her adoptive father's quiet strength. And though they never had biological children together, their family expanded in unexpected ways. In the spring of 1877, they took in twin boys orphaned by a fever that claimed many in the region. Later came a teenage girl whose father, one of Gideon's cowhands, died in a riding accident. Each child found in the Oakes household what they needed most: stability, education, and unconditional love. Through it all, Gideon and Temperance's bond only deepened. On summer evenings, they often sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors no artist could capture, marveling at how a simple act of kindness, the sharing of water in a time of desperate thirst, had created a wellspring of love that would never run dry.